Hello everyone, welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to share a new story with you, so let's dive in. The room within the Metro PD station had a drab institutional gray hue, furnished with worn-out government-issue tables and chairs. This space differed from the grand, theatrical interrogation rooms often seen on TV, being quite cramped and just a tad bigger than a typical bathroom. An older, sturdy detective exuding an air of authority navigated his way around the scratched metal table and settled into a chair. With a firm hand, he placed a pile of file folders on the table and motioned for two men waiting at the doorway to sit down. "Have a seat," the detective commanded in a husky voice. The first man, middle-aged and impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, entered the room with precision. He guided in another man of similar age, who was less polished in appearance and clearly uncomfortable in his ill-fitting suit coat. His hands. The man with calloused, rough hands appeared to be a blue-collar worker, while the other man had neatly trimmed nails and a polished demeanor of someone who was accustomed to wearing a shirt and tie. The detective gestured towards an old cassette recorder on the table and thanked the counselor for attending the meeting with his client. He asked if they could record the conversation, to which the attorney responded with a short, mocking laugh. "Really, detective? Do you think this relic has been functional since the days of Pink Floyd and parachute pants?" The attorney motioned towards a large smoke detector on the ceiling, mentioning that there was no expectation of privacy in a Metro PD interrogation room. They went through the formalities of stating names, date, and time for the record before the attorney. "Since we're laying down conditions, Detective Litton, make one thing clear. My client is not under arrest and is free to leave at any time," he stated. The detective leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "We're just having a conversation here, speaking freely." "Good. So, now that we've confirmed this will be a verbal conversation and not conducted through smoke signals or interpretive dance, will you state for the record that my client is not under arrest and is free to leave at any time?" Rennie asked. The detective smirked. He'd been in this job far too long to take such theatrics personally. He viewed it like a duel between a seasoned pitcher and a batter, both playing their parts in the game. "Fine, counselor, your client is not under arrest and is free to leave at any time," the detective confirmed. The attorney turned to his client, who shrugged and settled into his chair. The detective opened the top folder and slid a series of color photographs across the table. The images depicted the charred remains of a Inspecting the damaged residence and donning his reading glasses, the detective carefully reviewed a printed report. Displaying the document to the man seated alongside his attorney, he explained the official findings from the Fire Investigation Unit. The report concluded that the fire, which destroyed the home and the wife's car in the garage, had been intentionally set using acetone-based fluid as an accelerant. The detective pointed out that the fire originated in the hallway outside the couple's shared bedroom. Glancing over his glasses, he reminded the man that insurance does not cover losses caused by arson. The client remained silent, while his attorney interjected, emphasizing the importance of the presumption of innocence in the legal system and cautioning against jumping to conclusions based on personal experiences. Adjusting his tie, the attorney emphasized the client's right to legal representation, regardless of the situation. A client, a father and homeowner who pays taxes, is facing a paramilitary force of 1,000 strong, equipped with crime labs and a significant legal budget, all backed by a major metropolitan government. Despite this imbalance of power, you expect him to undergo interrogation alone. Detective, who is truly the oppressor in this situation. The detective paused before pulling out two more photos from the folder and placing them on the table. "You make a valid point, counselor. Arson cases usually fall under the fire department's jurisdiction, not the Metro PD's. However, when it comes to matters of murder, assault, and attempted murder, they land on my desk." As the attorney reached for the photos, the detective turned to the client. "Sir, do you have any comments on these images?" The photos depicted the charred remains of the house, with bold spray-painted words on the wall. "Cheating lives here." The attorney examined the photographs with the scrutiny of an art connoisseur, even tilting them for a closer look. After furrowing his brow, he carefully placed the pictures back on the table. You know, detective, he stated, I worked my way through college and law school as a photographer. If I were critiquing these photos, I'd say the framing is solid, but personally, I'd have used a different filter and adjusted the f-stop to enhance the depth of field. That would have really made the subject pop. The attorney spoke with a pensive expression. The detective let out a sharp exhale. Don't get cute, counselor. I want to hear what your client thinks of this artistic statement. The attorney smirked slightly. Detective, I've known my client for nearly 30 years. I can confidently say he has no interest in photography and wouldn't know an f-stop from a bus stop. So I'm advising him not to comment on your collection. The detective exhaled heavily and then pulled out another folder, tossing a few printed sheets onto the table. That's a statement from your wife detailing a 7-month affair. One of her coworkers remained silent as the client recounted the interaction. The detective's tone grew stern as he shared. She wasn't particularly cooperative at first. However, her attitude quickly shifted when she discovered her bank accounts were empty. Suddenly, she was furious and eager to place blame on someone else. Breaking his silence, the previously quiet man muttered, "Stupid," drawing the detective's attention. Raising an eyebrow, the detective remarked on the choice of words and pointed to a photo of graffiti on the charred wall, quoting Einstein about the concept of stupidity. The other man simply shrugged as the detective returned the wife's statement to a folder. Continuing his analysis, the detective noted the wife's fortunate absence during the fire, despite her car being in the garage, which cast a suspicious light on her potential involvement. The detective threw another piece of paper onto the table in front of either man, along with a photo. He questioned the origin of the good fortune that had allowed the man's wife to avoid being present during the fire that consumed their house. Pointing to a picture of a man in his early 30s, the detective identified him as the wife's lover, despite his altered appearance following an attack with a baseball bat. Turning to another page, he presented evidence that the wife and her companion were at a local bar on the night of the fire, corroborated by staff and witnesses. As the man started to speak, his attorney intervened, and a new document was revealed. The detective highlighted notes from a conversation with the man's employer on the night of the fire, pointing out discrepancies in the man's claimed work schedule. You indicated that you cashed out your $401k. There must have been a significant penalty, the detective observed, leaning back and studying the two men. Would you like to know my thoughts? The lawyer asked, adjusting his cufflinks. Detective, if we decline, I assume you will share them regardless. So since we have no choice, please go ahead, the detective said, leaning forward and closing the distance. The investigation reveals that at some point, you discovered your wife's affair. You cleared out your bank accounts and then confronted her boyfriend, using a baseball bat on his face, the detective recounted, ticking off points on his fingers. The motive, the affair, the opportunity, your wife's car in the garage, creating the illusion that she was home, and the means, the fire. That's the trifecta, he concluded, leaning back. And you know what? I can't really blame you. In law enforcement, cheating spouses and divorces are as common as bad coffee and parking tickets. My own ex-wife betrayed me after 12 years of marriage. I almost wish I had the courage to do what you did. But here's the catch. And I might be able to get you an ASA who feels the same way I do. Otherwise, you're looking at insurance fraud, arson, bank fraud, assault, attempted homicide, and that's just for starters. If I can piece this together, imagine what a jury will do. The attorney and his client exchanged a look, then the man gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The lawyer turned toward the detective, fingers steepled. Did you know that Einstein also said the difference between genius and stupidity is that genius has limits? He placed his hands on the table. You have facts but extremely faulty conclusions. I saw a squirrel run up a tree outside your precinct today. Does that mean all trees have squirrels? From his briefcase, he pulled out a file. My client was aware of his wife's affair within the first week. Here's the paperwork for divorce filed shortly afterward. He was simply waiting for his son to graduate high school. No reason his mother's behavior should ruin his senior year. Another folder landed on the table. Unfortunately, His marriage dissolution sparked severe depression, rendering work impossible. He subsequently resigned and turned to gambling as a coping mechanism, leading to the rapid depletion of his savings as shown in these ATM slips. Facing financial strain, he neglected his homeowner's insurance, considering the house was fully paid for. While suspicions of insurance fraud arose, the detective maintained silence as the attorney pursued the case. However, the turning point came when the client withdrew his $401k for one last gambling attempt, but decided to allocate the remaining funds to his son's college fund, as evidenced by these bank records. Realizing the destructive nature of his behavior, he sought help by attending his first Gamblers Anonymous meeting, confirmed by his sponsor. Reflecting on the chaos, the lawyer gestured towards the photo of the battered lover. Highlighting the complexity of the situation, the detective corrected himself, saying that the wrong suspect was being pursued. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that another man, who also had a romantic interest in the soon-to-be ex-wife, and a stronger motive was involved. The lawyer questioned how this man could have been present at both the nightclub and the scene of the fire, and what his reasons might have been. Additional evidence was presented, revealing discrepancies in the initial investigation, including information from the private investigator who interviewed nightclub staff. It was disclosed that the other man, referred to as Lover Boy, had actually been ejected from the club after a confrontation with the ex-wife due to an injury that rendered him incapable of performing. This revelation was supported by his history of violence and prior arrests. The detective pointed out that the man possessed the means and temperament to carry out such an act of retaliation. The lawyer then mentioned that their client had an alibi for the night of the fire, as he was attending a church bingo event and later closed a diner with his sponsor, showcasing that he was occupied elsewhere during the time of the incident or EPHRISD. A VHS tape landed on the pile as they prepared to gamble. Apologies for the outdated format, but in the diner, a relic from the past, security footage revealed my client and his sponsor spending the entire night in the corner booth. They consumed a lot of coffee, and there was no evidence of arson or murder. Additionally, they left the waitress a generous tip. A hush fell over the room, and the detective sighed, massaging his temple. "It appears I need to have a discussion with the individual connected to the case," the lawyer commented with a grin, gesturing to the evidence in front of them. "I believe that would be a sensible course of action, detective." The room fell quiet as the detective examined the stack of evidence on the table. "I appreciate you sharing all this information, but I will need to investigate further. Meanwhile, I'd expect your client to remain in town." His tone brooked no arguments. The lawyer rose and signaled for his client to do the same. "Detective, unless you've started a second career as a travel agent, my client's whereabouts are not your concern. All communications will." As the detective observed quietly, the pair exited the small, dimly lit room without exchanging handshakes. Outside, a light rain misted the air, offering relief from the oppressive summer heat. The attorney pulled out his smartphone and began scrolling through messages, while his client, as if loosening a noose, tugged at his necktie and muttered about the detective being difficult. The attorney, still engrossed in his screen, mentioned that the detective was actually known as one of the good ones, with a long-standing reputation for being a skilled investigator with the Metro Force. The client, eyeing him skeptically, asked if there was any cause for concern. The attorney reassured him, saying the detective was tough but fair, experienced enough to focus on valid leads rather than chasing after dead ends, advising the client to continue attending his GA meetings and avoid major purchases for the time being. The man abruptly stopped crumpling his tie at the mention of purchases, demanding clarification. At that moment, the attorney finally looked up, ready to elaborate. Up from his phone, smirking, "If you don't want to tell me, fine. But I've never seen you buy a lottery ticket, let alone place a bet. Funny that your GA sponsor just happens to be an accountant specializing in international banking." The rain grew heavier. The attorney pocketed his phone. "I've got to get back to the office. Need a lift?" His client shook his head, pointing to the curb. "Nah, my boy's picking me up." A grin spread across the attorney's face, How's my godson? You tell him his uncle expects big things from him at state. The man's face softened, and you believe it. Full athletic scholarship. I throw a ball and I'm lucky if it hits the ground. God knows where he got the talent. He got it from all those years you played catch with him, all the travel teams, all the sports camps you paid for. How much OT did that cost you? His brother just shrugged. You find a way when it's for your kid. It's our last summer together before he leaves for school. The attorney clapped his brother on the back. Tell him I'm sorry, eh? I couldn't make it to his last game, but I'll definitely be there this Saturday. I hope he hits me a homer. Are you joining us for dinner afterwards? Mom is still upset that you missed last week. The attorney couldn't help but smile wider. If you had seen the person I was with last Saturday, you would understand why I missed dinner with Mom. He paused. Who knows, maybe you'll meet her this time. Please let Mom know I'm bringing a date, and please, no talk about grandkids. As a car pulled up, the man waved and opened the door. Unlikely that Mom will comply with that request. Back at the precinct, the detective's suit jacket was casually thrown over the chair as he painstakingly typed away on the keyboard with his thick fingers. A female officer, as sturdy in build as her reputation, dropped onto the chair beside his desk. Are you finishing up the paperwork on that cheating arson case involving the attorney and his brother? She inquired. The detective kept typing. When lawyers are involved, it's all just a show. However, that attorney is more competent than most. We actually coach in the same PL baseball league, she smirked. I love how you keep throwing in the cheating wife line like you know the struggle. You and your high school sweetheart are hitting what, 30 years? 31, he grunted. She let out a whistle. Damn. If you committed first-degree murder, the parole board would have let you out by now. Still typing, he replied. Might as well stay locked up. I'd never find another woman like her. Ain't that the truth? She chuckled. Wish I could find me a lady like her. I'd marry her in a heartbeat. Doesn't matter, you can't get married in this state anyway. She straightened in her chair. Don't get me started on those holes at the state capitol. He cut in before she could launch into a tirade. Not my circus, not my monkeys, she slapped his back. You just love getting me wound up. Ignoring her, he turned to the printer, neatly stacking the pages. You think the hubby did the fire and tuned up the lover boy? The detective nodded. Of course, but this case is a dog. The protagonists, everybody sides with them over banks or insurance companies. The new lawyer fresh out of law school is advised to move on to something else. Training new puppies is a breeze. While in the car, the young driver stole a glance at his father. How did it go? Did your uncle handle it? He asked. The father turned to his son and admitted, I never mentioned it before, but I'm sorry about the house burning down. The youth scoffed, remarking, Our house? You mean Mom's house? He mockingly imitated a high-pitched voice, recalling the strict rules enforced there. Don't run inside. Don't play in the yard. You're messing up the carpet, disturbing the plants, ruining the grass. His expression turned disdainful as he added, That wasn't a home. It was a shrine to herself. His father observed him carefully before mentioning the coincidence of all his baseball equipment being conveniently stored at a friend's house on the night of the fire. The young man hesitated, mumbling, Oh, well, you know, Grandpa's place doesn't have much room, so I was pre-packing. The father's gaze shifted to the bandage on his son's arm peeking out from his sleeve. Seems a bit warm for long sleeves, don't you think? You should put some antibiotic on that burn. The boy quickly pulled down his sleeve. The boy's father questioned him about the sleeve that was burned, a result of sliding into third base during the last game. The father refuted his son's claim by stating that it was not what the boy's grandma had told him. He then proceeded to pick up the boy's cell phone, which was mounted on the dashboard, and dialed a number with a steady and inscrutable tone. Noticing a missing bat from the boy's collection, the father brought up the issue before setting the phone back and turning his attention to his son, who was holding onto the steering wheel tightly. He assured the boy that he understood what had happened and that he wouldn't mention it unless the boy wanted to discuss it. The father informed the son that he had programmed his uncle's number as the first on speed dial and instructed him to contact his uncle immediately if approached by law enforcement. He emphasized the importance of having the uncle, who was an attorney, present during any discussions related to the matter. The boy hardened his jaw and stared straight ahead. His fingers tensed on the wheel, but eventually nodded in agreement. In a different setting, a detective in the precinct reached over and took a nameplate. The partner absent-mindedly toyed with the object in their hands before placing it back on the desk with a resolute tap, silently signaling not to touch it again. "Let's go," the detective urged, grabbing their coat. "We can't be late for dinner again, or my wife will be furious. She always looks forward to having you with us." The partner chuckled and stood up to follow. As they passed by the desk, the detective's fingers grazed the engraved words on the plate, a cherished gift from his wife that held deep sentimental value. The inscription read, "If you can't change the world, at least embarrass the guilty." Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe.